this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Scams don't always look like scams anymore. AI can make a fake ticket offer look legit or a sportsbook text sound official. And once an identity thief gets your personal information, they can start using your name like it belongs to them. And then what? LifeLock helps detect potential identity threats and suspicious activity. And if identity theft happens, LifeLock's restoration specialist can help restore your identity, guaranteed, because only LifeLock truly protects your name and identity. Get LifeLock at LifeLock.com and use promo code FOOTBALL for up to 30% off your first year. That's LifeLock.com, code FOOTBALL.
Lowe's knows Sundays are for football. So tackle your home improvement projects by Saturday and earn your Sunday with great deals on LG and Bosch appliances, select Ego, DeWalt, Filtrete products, and more. Then once your to-do list is done, get ready to kick back, relax, and enjoy the game. Shop in-store or online now and earn your Sunday with help from Lowe's, official partner of the NFL.
This is the Late Round Podcast with your host, JJ Zacharisa.
What's up, everyone? It's JJ Zacharisa, and in this episode 1115 of the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast, thanks for tuning in. I've been doing episodes in August on players to target and players to avoid for years now, basically since the podcast started. But over the last handful of years, I've been doing these episodes with a guest. And those guests have been the same guests each year. Two of the absolute best in the fantasy football industry, and Evan Silva and Rich Rebar. It's sort of become tradition at this point. And these episodes, I look forward to them each and every year. So today we've got Evan Silva from Establish the Run on the show to talk about 5 players he's targeting in drafts this year. He sent me over his list of 5, and then I added 5 more of my own. We don't automatically agree on each guy. But you guys can hear the reasoning, hear why we're thinking the way that we're thinking, and then hopefully make better decisions during your draft. Of course, with this being a players to target episode, we're doing this based on where these players typically get drafted. We're talking about values here. We're not just telling you to draft Jahmyr Gibbs. We all know that you should draft Jahmyr Gibbs. We're instead looking at this from the perspective of value. Now, before getting into my conversation with Evan, I just wanted to send another reminder to check out the Late Round Draft Guide. There's well over 270 pages of content that includes game theory, strategy, ways to spot breakouts and busts, players to target, players to avoid, and more. It's all updated weekly directly to your email inbox. Check it out, learn more over on lateround.com. Now let's look at 10 players to target with my guy, Evan Silva. All right, Evan, here we meet again. Last year we did some players to avoid. This year we're going to do players to target. We each have 5 guys that we will be talking through, kind of giving our takes, having a little back and forth about them. But I'll kick it to you first. Give us a player that you want to start with that you are targeting in a lot of your drafts this year.
Kenneth Walker. I mean, I think he should be a first-round pick, like a consensus first-round pick. He pretty consistently lasts until the early to middle portion of the second round. But I strongly believe that he belongs at I have him number 9 overall. I have him as my RB5 overall. I think it makes all the sense in the world for the Chiefs to build their offense around Kenneth Walker. I think that's what they're planning to do, especially with Patrick Mahomes coming off of December surgery. It was in December to rebuild his ACL and LCL. Patrick Mahomes has already talked openly about how he's not going to run as much this year. He ran a lot last year before he got hurt. Mm-hmm. That will translate, I think, to more checkdowns, more screens. The Chiefs want to go back to using more of the screen game, which was a staple of Andy Reid's offenses for many, many years, and they kind of have gotten away from that in recent seasons, but they've talked about how they want to get back to that. The Chiefs gave Kenneth Walker almost $15 million a year and almost $30 million guaranteed. That is a lot for a running back. The Chiefs' top pass catchers right now are Travis Kelce, who turns 37 a month into the season, and Rashee Rice, who had knee surgery in May and had to rehab from knee surgery in literal jail. Our offensive line guru at Establish the Run, Brandon Thorne, rated Kansas City's offensive line 8th best in the league. And I think you can strongly argue that Kenneth Walker is the Chiefs' best skill position player, aside from Patrick Mahomes at this point. His top backups are Amari DiMercado, who is in Kansas City on basically a veteran minimum deal, and rookie Emmett Johnson, who lasted until the 5th round of an historically bad running back class. So Kenneth Walker has so little in-house competition for work. This offense is going to revolve around Kenneth Walker. I like him as a longer shot bet to win NFL Offensive Player of the Year at 40-1.
Yeah, I love the call. You look at what the Chiefs had last year with Pacheco and Kareem Hunt. They were 8th in rushing success rate as a team. They were 27th in rushing yards over expected per attempt. And the reason for that we see that sort of dichotomy is, well, first off, we know that Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco are not explosive runners, right? They had one 20-plus yard run on over 280 carries last year, where Kenneth Walker does the exact opposite of that. Last year they were like 8.5%, 6%, 10-plus yard run rate. Kenneth Walker, 15%, 10-plus yard run rate, right? Like, Walker's been the home run hitter, lower success rate kind of player. And we even see that, you see that in his runs. He bounces the outside and he'll try to outrun defenders. And that, he can do it because he's very fast, but that also, he'll get tackled behind the line or just make a stupid play, and then that lowers his success rate. But with this offense, you're going to see high success rates. If they faced the highest percentage of light boxes last year. And so I think what we're going to see is, at the very least, a potentially just annihilation on the ground for Kenneth Walker and what he can do in the offense. And, like you said, the big question mark, I think, is the receiving stuff. But at the very least with him, he had that one target share spike season with Ryan Grubb when he was offensive coordinator. And then the other 3 seasons, he's been in like that 8% target share range. But like you said, I think they can get more back to the screen game a little bit more with Walker. And he's been good per route run, which to me signals that he can do this. It's not so much a deficiency as much as like he's just not being fed in that way. And then Mahomes coming off the ACL. I think that's another factor from a red zone perspective of them using Walker close there. I mean, your ranking's obviously aggressive at RB5. I have him at like RB8 or 9 or something like that, but he's in that giant tier for me, with like the Saquons and all of the, and Chase Browns and such. So I'm in because, in best ball, you're going to see, and that's the thing that I want to be clear about on today's show, is that we'll be shouting out like guys, obviously, that we're drafting versus ADP, but even in best ball, like Kenneth Walker's like a 1-2 turn type player. In season-long drafts, you look at season-long ADP managed leagues, he'll go in the mid to late second round, and at that area where it's like a clear teardrop in terms of where he's being drafted versus some of those other running backs, it's just such a clear target, in my opinion. Let's move on to one of my guys, and we'll talk about Parker Washington, Silva, because he's pretty controversial right now. I know that a lot of people are in for sure because there's a lot of camp hype. I almost wish that there wasn't camp hype with Washington because obviously his ADP's going to rise a little bit as a result of that. If you've been playing best ball, you're seeing him. We play on DraftKings over here at late round, and we've seen him go in round 5 very consistently over the last couple of weeks. But it's totally different in season long. He's wide receiver 35 over on Yahoo, which is after Brian Thomas, after Marvin Harrison Jr., after DK Metcalf. I personally am taking Parker Washington over all 3 of those players. I'm very bullish on what this offense did last year after Travis Hunter went down with that injury, and it also coincided with their bye. But pre-bye and pre-Hunter injury, we saw a 53% route share from Parker Washington. Post-bye and Hunter injury, we saw a 79% route share for Parker Washington. His yards per route run after the Travis Hunter injury was 1.45 yards better than both Brian Thomas and Jacoby Myers, which is absolutely insane. And Jacksonville, over that time frame, they were 3rd in the NFL in offensive touchdowns per game. We've seen this Liam Cohen offense force the ball to the slot. And the other thing with Parker Washington, just as a player, I think a lot of people have sort of like typecasted him as this like slot yak guy, which he can definitely do. He's kind of got that like running back build to him in a way, but he gets down the field. His ADOT is not 8 or 9 yards. I mean, he had a 12.5 yard ADOT last year, and he can make plays down the field, which I think is very, very important. That he's not just this PPR scammer. And then if you look at some historical trends where if you look at middle round wide receivers who had a greater than 2 yards per route run rate, but a points per game mark less than 12 in the previous season. So guys who are very efficient per route run, but they didn't get it done in points per game, probably because they weren't seeing that much volume. Historically, middle round wide receivers ranked 19 to 42, who fit that criteria, they've outperformed ADP expectation by 1.2 PPR points per game, which is pretty strong, all things considered. There's also 2 other guys that fit that criteria this year, is Terry McLaurin and Luther Burden. So guys who are very efficient per route run, but they just didn't get it done in points per game, and there were obviously reasons for that. But I think this offense is going to continue to run through Washington in the end. The camp hype is not stopping that thought and feeling. Obviously there's plenty of mouths to feed, if you will, in this Jacksonville offense. But to me, what they did signals that they should probably continue to do that thing because it worked for them last year. Similar to they went out and they draft a blocking tight end in round 2. They get Tanner Koziel later in the draft, who I think is actually a pretty good prospect and pass catching prospect. But regardless, a lot of the thought was, are they going to force more, heavier sets, heavier personnel, and run a lot more 12? But I think that this team is smart and logical, and Liam Cohen's a good coach. And obviously personnel dictates that they should be running a lot more 11 than anything else, given the personnel that they do have, at wide receiver. And given that, I don't think Washington's going to leave the field quite as frequently as we thought, maybe even like 3 or 4 months ago. I'm in on Parker Washington. He's going a lot later in managed leagues. And so if you're not getting him in best ball, which sure, I get it to a degree, but I do think that you should be snatching him in season long.
So I think that Parker Washington is really good, like a really good player. I think he's always been really good.
Yep.
He's a guy, his final season at Penn State, he broke out as a 19-year-old at Penn State in 2021, and he had 64 catches for 820 yards with bad quarterback play. And then the next year, he was on pace to do similar stuff, but then he broke his ankle, and he still declared for the draft.
Right.
So he did not participate at the combine, and then he was not 100% at his pro day. So he went in the 6th round. And dudes that go in the 6th round or 7th round or UDFA, they just don't carry the same weight, especially when you have teams that are transitioning front offices or coaching staffs. They're not tied to those players like they are to early round picks. So that puts Parker Washington at a disadvantage. He still overcomes the changing from Doug Peterson to Liam Cohen and the changing of the front offices, and endears himself so much to Liam Cohen that he becomes the Jaguars' #1 receiver for the back half of last season, and produces in that role.
Yep.
I think he's really good. However, the Jaguars have 4 receivers that they can play.
Yeah.
And now they have 2 tight ends after they used a 2nd round. They locked up Brenton Strange, and they drafted Nate Borkircher in the 2nd round. And so I'm Liam Cohen, it just feels like he wants to play a lot of different personnel packages and keep the defense off balance by playing a lot of different guys. Jacoby Myers is going to play.
Yeah,
Brian Thomas has a unique role within the Jaguars offense. He's going to play. Travis Hunter is probably not going to play that much, but when he's in the game, I think they're going to be trying to get him the ball.
Right.
So I'm on the fence with Parker Washington, even though I believe, I think it might be worth it taking a stand on him. This is a bet on talent situation.
Right.
But when I zoom out and look at the environment and the situation, I'm just I haven't taken a big stand on him.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of this definitely for me, because I did not expect to be in on Washington this year because I figured he would be steamed up and, people were just really excited about what he did last year. And he is to a degree. I think, again, in high stake circles, best ball circles, you definitely see him going where I think he should probably be going. So it's not I was overweight just based on me getting him in the late 6th round at times earlier this offseason, but it's obviously gone up a lot more, right? But realistically, this is pulled from last week, this ADP. This is pulled from Thursday of last week. And so, 5 days or 6 days prior to most of you guys listening to this episode, his consensus ADP on CBS, Yahoo, and ESPN, and overall ADP, so not where he's ranked as a wide receiver, 90th overall. 90th overall in a season. Why would you not take a chance at that point in the draft? I would take a chance. I mean, I have him ranked like 60th over. Like, I think he's like a, like end of 5 round kind of player, or round 5 kind of player. Because that's when I start really going to upside mode and thinking about, the ceiling case for a lot of these guys. And the fact that we can get him almost 3 rounds or after that is kind of nuts in my opinion. Just based on what we saw down the, because I think that like you said, the environment is rough. Like, it's not the easiest. I mean, it's good from the standpoint of efficiency and the offense should be good. It's rough from a competition standpoint. I think Brian Thomas is a very good receiver. Jacoby Myers is a really underrated receiver. And obviously Travis Hunter, I think, is going to play more offense probably than what they're or what the consensus thinks right now. And so, yes, that's super, super scary. But when you're in that range in the draft, it just feels like you should be betting on talent, and you should just be leaning into that a little bit more and saying go for it. But I can understand more of the hesitation if you're, in round 5 and there's some really good wide receivers and some really good talent that's going around him. That's when it would be a little bit scarier. All right, Evan, let's hear your next player on the list.
I don't want to say that we disagreed on Parker Washington. I honestly, I've thought about, I think about it every day. Like, should I take a stand on Parker Washington? Like a bet on time. I think about it every day, and I just have not gotten there yet. But I know that we're going to disagree on this player. So
let's hear it.
This is when the fun starts. Javonte Williams. So unlike JJ, the Cowboys love Javonte Williams. Okay, because they have showed that through their actions. They made re-signing Javonte Williams to a 3-year, $24 million deal with $16 million guaranteed, literally their second move of the entire offseason. They released some linebacker. That was their first move of the first transaction of the offseason. The Cowboys' second transaction was to lock up Javonte Williams. And then the Cowboys did not draft a single running back, nor did they sign a single running back in free agency.
Right.
Brandon Thorne rates the Cowboys' offensive line top 10 in the NFL. And in our notes, we had him Brandon Thorne wrote an article for us breaking down each offensive line. It's super, super in-depth. Check it out at Establish the Run.
Does better offensive line work than anyone else in the world, basically.
And I think he gets better every year, too.
Yeah.
And this is his best article. He specified in his write-up that the Cowboys' strength as an offensive line is their run blocking. Javonte Williams is not like a sexy pick, and and JJ's about to lay that all out. But he is a true every down back in a top 10 offense with a chance to be top 5.
Yep.
He just turned 26 years old in April. And you remember he had a super debilitating, almost career-threatening knee injury. I believe it was in 2022. And he's sort of been on his way. I mean, it felt like at one point in Denver that he could fall out of the league.
Yeah.
But he is obviously resurrected his career. The Cowboys love him. He typically lasts until the middle to late parts of the 3rd round and sometimes the early 4th. And I think that he belongs – I actually think that he belongs near the 2-3 turn, and I'll take him every time in the middle of the 3rd round. I think he's a high floor pick, and I think he has upside to compete for the league lead in rushing touchdowns this year.
So – do you know where you have him ranked right now?
Yeah, I can look at it right now.
So the reason I'm curious of where you're at with him versus like Breece Hall, right? Where, to me, Breece has the profile. I
literally have them next to each other.
Okay. So to be fair, I still have Javonte. Look, Silva's painting me as this huge hater, right? This huge Javonte fader. And as I still have him like RB15. I still think that he belongs like close enough to that area. He's risen a little bit in my rankings just because I've gotten to the point where, and I was telling Silva this before we started recording, where of course I'm going to have a data backbone with my takes and the way that I approach this stuff. But at the same time, I want to, obviously provide context and not overthink things and have just sort of that like, over analysis angle to this that I think doesn't do anyone any good. And Javonte is one of those players where I'm trying not to overthink it, because there are things that historically point to, a potential underperformance with Javonte Williams. Last year, he had a 0.4 yards per route run rate, which is beyond bad. I mean, that's
He's
legitimately
a gross
atrocious.
receiver.
Yeah.
He's gross.
Right. Legitimately atrocious.
He has caught a lot of passes in the NFL, but he
Right.
is extremely inefficient.
Right. And so typically when you get a yards per route run rate that low, we've actually never seen a running back hit a double-digit percentage target share off of that low of a yards per route run rate. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, not checking these boxes, kind of checking the traditional dead zone back profile, right? But then I take a step back and I look at it and I'm like, I think that Jaden Blue is probably going to take on more than he did last year, but I don't want Jaden Blue to be the reason that I'm not drafting the clear RB1 in an offense that has consistently been, a top 10 offense in the league, especially for fantasy purposes. So I've come around on Javonte. I'm not fading him. He's not a player to avoid for me. I think that it's getting interesting in that running back area in general in drafts, because I like Breece Hall this year, versus the market. Just because I think that offensive line is a lot better than people give it credit for, and that situation could be a lot better than what people believe. And so I have Breece ahead of him because I just like the pass catching profile more. And then now you're getting into like Jeremiah Love stuff, right? Because like he's fallen for me just because I don't know how competent that organization's going to be with him, And so to me, it's should we just be drafting Javonte over Jeremiah Love at this point? Are you there, or do you have Love ahead, or are you way out on Love?
I'm pretty out on Love.
Yeah.
I have Javonte at RB12. I have Jeremiah Love at RB15.
Okay. I think that's where I'm starting to trend too. It's just I'm getting more and more nervous about Jeremiah Love. But at the same time, man, I've seen round 3 and round 4 of drafts as pretty flat in general, which is why I don't have a strong opinion on someone even going for Javonte in the early third or something, because I don't think that there's so many clear-cut paths to go, unless at this point, the way that Malik Neighbors is trending, if he falls or something like that, or I'm really high on Devontae Smith, and there are some wide receivers that I really like in that area. But if we're talking strictly about the running back position, yeah, if you want to go that direction, I can understand going Javonte.
Every player in the league has a scouting report: strengths, weaknesses, history, tendencies, everything an opponent wants to know. But what if somebody built a scouting report on you? Data brokers collect your personal stats, your name, address, phone number, family details, and other private information. Then they package it up and legally sell it to anyone willing to pay, sometimes just for pennies. And then what? The person buying your information may not be looking to draft you. They may be looking to scam you, steal your identity, and start using your name like it belongs to them. That's where LifeLock comes in. LifeLock's automatic data broker removal tool helps you find exposed personal information and remove it from those data brokers. If you fall victim to identity theft, LifeLock's restoration specialist will block and tackle for you, which means they'll handle your case from start to finish and restore your identity guaranteed. Because only LifeLock truly protects your name and your identity. So go get LifeLock at LifeLock.com and use promo code FOOTBALL for up to 30% off your first year. That's LifeLock.com, code FOOTBALL. Again, LifeLock.com, code FOOTBALL.
This episode sponsored by Homebase. Homebase is built for small businesses trying to do it all. The neighborhood coffee shop, the local gym, the family-run restaurant. With Homebase, you can schedule your team, track time, run payroll, and manage hiring from one easy app. So you can spend less time chasing timesheets and more time running the business your customers love. More than 150,000 small businesses already use Homebase to keep their teams on track. Start free at joinhomebase.com. Homebase, built for small businesses that do it all.
Let's move on to my next player. I'm going to go with Chase Brown as the next one. I think that in that round 2 running back pocket, the two guys I've gravitated towards most are Kenneth Walker and Chase Brown. Those are the guys that I feel most confident in from a floor ceiling perspective. I'm not necessarily including Ashton Genty in there as much just because he'll go a little bit earlier oftentimes, but these are the guys that kind of go at the end of that tier, Brown and Walker. And Chase Brown, to me, has an outside chance, not even outside, like a very real chance to be a top 5 running back in fantasy this year. If you look at his first 6 games last year, 78% running back rush share, 13% target share. He was a straight up bell cow in that offense, but he was only averaging 9.7 PPR points per game. That was during a stretch where, Jake Browning was under center and their offensive line was absolute garbage to start last year. And then after those games, he averaged 20.4 PPR points per game. And in games with Joe Burrow, Chase Brown averaged 21 PPR points per game, only behind Christian McCaffrey, Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Jonathan Taylor. He was right there when Joe Burrow was healthy. Some might say that has something to do with Samaje Perine missing time during that stretch. But he still had a 14% target share with Joe Burrow last year. The ceiling is just really phenomenal. And an offense, too, that, and I heard Thorne mention this, that I didn't even realize that I think is really key. This is the first time that, if I recall, that Joe Burrow has the same starting offensive lineman year over year, is what Thorne had mentioned, I believe on your show. I think I was listening to it in the car one day. And to me, that's huge because the offensive line for Cincinnati has been by far the biggest struggle and problem they've had the last couple of years on offense. And now if you have some continuity there, more of them being like a middle of the road offensive line instead of a bottom 5, bottom 7 one, that's where things could start to really click and this offense could really start to dominate. And if we get more neutral scripts, we get more of those favorable scripts, I think Chase Brown could benefit, overall within this offense. We have market score now with late round fantasy football, where we look at the market score number, of course, the raw number, but we have market score comps, where we'll look at a player's market score, his overall ADP, and his career year, and find comps based on those numbers. And Chase Brown's closest comps are 2014 DeMarco Murray, when he scored 22 PPR points per game, and 2016 Le'Veon Bell, where he scored 21.2 PPR points per game. When you look at all of the round 2 running backs, and this includes Kenneth Walker, they all have some sort of change within their environment, right? Even like coordinator changes, and there's something that's moving that makes them at least a little bit more volatile. Chase Brown has such a stable environment that nothing really changed offensively for Cincinnati year over year, and it makes me feel more bullish and optimistic about what he can do in fantasy. So Chase Brown, round 2 all day. I'm above market, and I just think he's a really good pick. Love it.
He's like an auto pick. I think he's worth consideration in the middle of the second round, and he's a lock pick anywhere in the late second round.
100%.
Brandon Thorne has the Bengals with the number 17 offensive line this year. That's really good.
Yeah, for them, right.
Yes, for them. And also, he noted we did an ETR retreat this offseason, and he came, Brandon Thorne did, and I was just quizzing him on literally everything. I drove him home because he was flying out of Chicago. We did the retreat like an hour and a half out of Chicago. I made sure that Brandon Thorne sat next to me on the drive home. I just quizzed him about every offensive line. He'd been hanging out with Ted Karras, who is the Bengals center. And I was like, oh, interesting. So, what did you learn from Ted Karras? Or he did a show with him. And Ted Karras loves the Bengals' depth on the offensive line too. This kid Jalen Rivers, he thinks is really promising, and they have Cody Ford, who's made a lot of starts in the NFL. So not only do the Bengals have this continuity on the offensive line, they also maybe have some depth to withstand some injuries. I love to hear that. Another thing to support your point about the target share regarding Chase Brown, the Bengals have not addressed third receiver or tight end, really. I mean, Eric All's kind of interesting. Yeah. Gesicki can do some things, although he's barely playable in the NFL because he's he's just a total one-trick pony. Yeah. But I mean, Chase Brown is the Bengals' third receiver too. Yeah. Yep. He's like a virtual every down back and a third receiver on a high scoring offense behind an upward trending offensive line. Yep. Give him to me.
Yes. It's like, I'm sitting here. I'm like, I don't want to overthink this. I know. And it's crazy because people have this anchoring bias with Chase Brown because of the way he started last year, but he dominated after that first month and a half of fantasy of the season when they got Flacco and then obviously got Burrow. All right, Evan, hit me with your next one.
Mike Evans. Do I just take all the boomer players or what?
I mean, you have a non-boomer on this list that we'll get to eventually.
Okay,
but yeah, This is a boomer pick, but I'm here for
leaning
it.
into the bit, the boomer bit. Hardcore here. Mike Evans has a chance to be an absolute volume monster in San Francisco this year. Ricky Pearsall already out for the year. George Kittle tore his Achilles in January and turns 33 in October. Christian McCaffrey is 30. He had the most carries and touches of his career last year. The 49ers are so desperate they had to bring back probably washed Deebo Samuel purely out of desperation at the start of training camp. I know. Mike Evans is 33 with a seemingly increasing propensity to soft tissue injuries, which is a little bit scary. But he is Kyle Shanahan's new X-receiver with high-quality quarterback play from Brock Purdy in an otherwise extremely fragile 49ers skill position group. So this year, and by the way, his ADP has been going down lately because there was something about, I don't know, some injury that does not matter at all. So people are really scared about that, and his ADP has been trending downward. This year, we can get a future first ballot Hall of Famer in a juicy fantasy environment at like a 5th or even 6th round cost.
Yeah,
I think he deserves to be going closer to the 3rd or the 4th round turn. So I have a ton of Mike Evans this year, and I plan on cashing a lot of checks with Mike Evans scoring a ton of touchdowns.
I've done a I don't want to say 180 because I wasn't out on Evans, but I've gotten way into Evans over the last month or so.
Let's go.
And thinking about the situation and thinking about, it's kind of crazy that Evans ADP, like you said, has gone down post Ricky Pearsall injury, right? Like you would think that he'd go up at least half a round, but obviously this other injury that's lingering, that's there, is scaring some people off. And I get it. Like I think we could agree that it's at least a volatile pick, right? Because he's older, the injury stuff exists. And market score, one of his top comps, I've mentioned this on the show before, is unfortunately Allen Robinson's lone season with the Rams, where so there is that fear in the back of my mind where I'm like, what if the dude is dust and this is but then you sit back and you look at what happened last year in Tampa Bay. Not only did Emeka Egbuka really suffer from the Baker Mayfield play and have a outside the top 100 catchable targets rate, Mike Evans did too. And now you're moving him to San Francisco where, like you said, there's a lot of volume potential, but also he's been a down the field threat throughout his career. Even last year, his 12th year in the league, 89th percentile ADOT. He's getting down the field. Brock Purdy, number 1 in the NFL in completion percentage on 20-plus air yard throws last year and over the last 3 years combined. He has been the best quarterback at completing 20-plus air yard throws in the NFL over this time. Now, you can say scheme, you can say whatever. Brock Purdy's a baller. He's a lot better than what people give him credit for still to this day. So I think the match here is incredible. And then you think about what they might do close to the end zone, and if they're worried at all about CMC and his health, and obviously if CMC were to go down, their backups just aren't experienced and solid enough that they would rely on them close to the end zone, then all of a sudden it turns into a Devontae Adams situation from last year, right, in LA. And I could just see this really, I mean, like I said, I do think that this is a higher volatile selection, but when you're at that 5-6 turn, which is where he goes in managed season-long leagues, early 6th round, you should be shooting for upside. You should just be going for it. And to me, if you're getting Mike Evans as your wide receiver 3 or even wide receiver 4, which is very possible, that's crazy. In this environment, that just seems pretty crazy. Next one on my list, I will go, you know what? I'm going to go with Malik Willis. This one to me is more game theory than anything else. It's a why would you not do this kind of situation where in most, home leagues, most managed leagues, you're going to have a pretty shallow, bench or roster situation where there's going to be enough starting quarterbacks and usable quarterbacks on your waiver wire. And even if they're not, even if you're entering a league and you're like, oh, my league's really deep, it's a 14 teamer, whatever. And, we start multiple flex spots in our bench, yada, yada, yada. I think that you can pair Malik Willis with a more stable piece like Bo Nix or something and just have a solid quarterback that will be able to get you something. And I still think Nix has some upside too. And then obviously Malik Willis being that insanely volatile, super high upside, super low floor type of player. But I would argue that the floor is not as low as what people might think. He had 3 starts in Green Bay. He averaged 58 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown per game. It's 11.8 points per game with his legs. We've had 25 quarterback seasons where since 2011, where the quarterback had 7 or more points per game via rushing. So that's far below where Malik Willis was at. Malik Willis is almost definitely going to hit 7 points per game via rushing this season. It's a higher end number for sure, but he's also like borderline prolific as a runner. Like we've already seen that in the NFL. That's what he was as a prospect. And so basically I looked at quarterbacks who had 300 or more attempts in a season and then hit 7 or more points per game with their legs. We had 25 of them. So they were playing a good number of games, all while getting it done on the ground, right? Of those 25 seasons, only 3 of them ranked outside the top 10 in points per game at quarterback. Now, obviously, you're getting skewed results to a degree with like good passers like Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen. But the point remains that none of those guys ranked outside the top 20, which is where Malik Willis is being drafted right now. And I think when I think about Willis, I'm basically saying this is a Justin Fields type bet that we've been making over the last 3 years in fantasy, where we actually knew that Fields was a questionable passer, over the last handful of years that we've been drafting him. But we've been drafting him because when he starts, he gives us usable weeks. He's a very usable player, and he gives us spiked weeks whenever he has just 2 passing touchdowns because of what he can do with his legs. So this really comes down to the fact of, what if Malik Willis is actually decent at throwing the football? What if he's a much better passer than what the market is just assuming because of this change in scenery and, his kind of career trajectory, and the fact that, look, you and I have been doing this for a while, Evan. Have you seen a wide receiver room as bad as Miami's entering a season?
No.
I don't think I have. Like, I think it's the worst pass catching room that I've ever seen I've been doing this since 2011, 2012. You've been doing
obviously you have Achane, but in terms of wide receiver and tight end unit, no,
it's got to be the worst, right? Yeah. And so like that's very scary for sure. And but I also think that's what's keeping this price lower. If he had one alpha, I think he'd be going like 4 or 5 spots higher in quarterback rank, where he's going after QB 20 consistently. So to me, this is more of a throw that dart. I'm not saying that Malik Willis is going to be a stud. I'm saying we don't know. And the market is kind of assuming right now that it does know. What we do know is that he's a great rusher, and that often wins in fantasy football. So I'm going to lean into that.
So I could say a ton of negative things and paint an extremely negative picture about Malik Willis right now.
Right.
However, based on his draft cost, I don't really care about the negatives.
Right.
Regardless of format where I'm drafting him, I love drafting him in best ball. But when he's going as late as he is, I think you just think about the positives. And what you want at the end of the day, you just want to make sure, especially in best ball, you want to make sure that he keeps his job.
Right.
You want this team to not circle the drain like immediately, like basically what happened with Justin Fields last year.
Right.
That's going to be a very common comparison. Justin Fields went way earlier than Malik Willis is going this year, by the way. And I think that starts with the offensive line, painting the positive picture, because the Dolphins have invested a lot into this offensive line. They have 2 mountains of men at left tackle and left guard in Patrick Paul and Caden Proctor. It's the biggest left tackle and left guard combination in the NFL. Speaking of Brandon Thorne, this is going to end up being the Brandon Thorne show. Brandon Thorne told me that the Dolphins center, Aaron Brewer, last year should have won that award, Protector of the Year. Best center in the league, according to Brandon Thorne. So you have 2 mountains at left guard and left tackle, and then the best center in the league. And then at right guard, you got Jonah Savayanea, second-round pick last year. And then at right tackle, you got Austin Jackson, who's made a lot of starts in the NFL, and you also have a decent backup in Jamari Sawyer. So you have the makings of a potentially quality offensive line, and you want that in front of a running quarterback, I believe. You don't want this situation to get out of hand. The Dolphins are losing every single week. They're not even competitive. Because they're playing from behind a lot, they're like, all right, Malik Willis can't, battle us back, so we're going to go to Quinn Ewers. Quinn Ewers, by the way, did not embarrass himself when he got opportunities last year. And they could be like, well, maybe he could throw us back into some games because Malik can't do that. That's what you want to avoid. And I think that the positivity starts with the offensive line, and you're hoping for a 1,000-yard rushing season, which Justin Fields did have. And I think it's squarely in Malik Willis's range potential outcomes, but you just got to make sure, you got to try to get this thing to not circle the drain like right away.
Yeah, 100%. And again, in a managed season-long league, okay, you drop him. And if you're worried about what direction this could go in, that's where I say, look, people think that I only take one quarterback on every one of my rosters. I think it's totally fine, especially if you're in like a 20-round draft, to take two quarterbacks, to pair him with like Brock Purdy or whichever quarterback out of that like giant tier ends up falling, get him with Malik Willis, and you're good to go because you're at least playing the upside game, with Willis, and you're able to capture that. Let's hear your next one, Evan.
Kyle Pitts. This isn't a boomer pick, is it? Kyle Pitts?
No.
It's just a guy that pisses everybody off.
No, the Mike Evans and Javonte ones were the only two boomer picks that you threw out there. Yeah.
Thanks. So I am well aware that Kyle Pitts was a perennial disappointment and borderline NFL draft bust from 2022 through 2024. He tore his PCL in 2022. We've seen Ricky Pearsall, Brashad Perryman, Brock Bowers, Dalton Kincaid. I mean, just an injury that will strip away years from your career, if not end it outright. Kyle Pitts has bounced back from that. It also didn't help him that Arthur Smith never liked Kyle Pitts. I mean, Can you think of a more anti-Arthur Smith player than Kyle Pitts?
No.
And Kyle Pitts, for his part, was not a good player when he was coming off the PCL injury in 2023 and 2024. So it is easy to forget that, of course, Kyle Pitts did win the Mackey Award in 2020. He was the 4th overall pick in the 2021 draft. He had over 1,000 yards as a rookie. Last year, he's finally healthy. He finishes second among tight ends, behind only Trey McBride in targets and catches. The Falcons loved him enough to give him the franchise tag, and then they gave him an extension with $36 million guaranteed, the most in the league for any tight end. Kevin Stefanski has a very tight end friendly history. The pass catcher core is just completely barren behind Drake London and Bijan Robinson, to the extent that we're talking about third-round pick Zachariah Branch as a potential, significant early contributor.
Yeah.
And Kyle Pitts is going on age 26. He is firmly in his prime. So a lot of things have worked against Kyle Pitts in his career. I don't think that things are working against him anymore. And I also think that Tua is sort of the perfect quarterback to just pepper Kyle Pitts with targets. So I have Kyle Pitts as my tight end 5 ahead of Tucker Kraft, Sam Laporta, and Harold Fannin.
I was going to ask you, because I see a lot of discussion on social media about like which quarterback would be better for this player, for that player. My stance on the Falcons, and I want to hear if you agree, my stance on the Falcons quarterback situation is, from a fantasy perspective, I just want Tua to start because he throws catchable targets. Like he's not the most friendly from like this team's going to dominate perspective. But we want, in the end, we do want that PPR scammy kind of look in fantasy. We just want these guys to get easy looks, and I think that we'll see easier looks with Tua. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Okay. It's good that we're on the same page. All right, I'm going to move on to my next player. I'm going to go with a tight end also, and I haven't talked about him that much, but he's been a target in the draft guide since the guide launched at the beginning of July. And I do want to give him some love on the show so that people know that I am in on him this year. And that's Dalton Kincaid. I was actually more so like on the sell side with him last year as he was doing some unsustainable stuff in the touchdown column. But he did finish he finished last year with a 2.79 yards per route run rate, which is absolutely bananas.
One of the best in the league.
Yeah. Just a crazy yards per route run rate. But he ran a route on just 51% of Buffalo's dropbacks, which was outside the top 30 among relevant tight ends. But that yards per route run rate was top 7 since 2011. And George Kittle has 3 of those in the top 7 because he's just a freak. So we're talking about like literal elite company with what Kincaid did last season. He finished tight end 14 because of that lack of usage. The route share was just so bad. But he was also playing a lot of that year hurt. He had the PCL injury, which is the same thing that Ricky Pearsall was dealing with, that he went back and got surgery for.
Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, Kyle Pitts. And this was, to be clear, 2 years ago where Kincaid had that issue, and then it lingered into last year and just continued throughout the year. So we're now very far removed from that injury, And there are some favorable reports about Kincaid being healthy right now. And the way I look at this is really just a math equation. Number one, I think he's just a good receiver, like a good player. But then you just think of this from a mathematical perspective. He led all tight ends last year in fantasy points per route run. He outpaced expectation by 2 touchdowns, sure. But he's finished inside the top 20 in fantasy points per route run in each of his other seasons. And he ranks 8th among 300 plus route run tight ends in fantasy points per route run since he entered the league. He's been a top 10 tight end within that statistic. So I'm imagining a world where that route share goes from outside the top 30 to more maybe top 20, top 15. And then maybe you have this, DJ Moore being there, opening things up a little bit for him. Because I think, they're obviously going to be using more. They need a presence on the perimeter. They have not had a presence on the perimeter for years now, which is why that offense has been funneling through, Khalil Shakir and Dalton Kincaid. And they just haven't had that player. I think that could open things up for Kincaid to maintain some of this efficiency. And if he is healthy, that route share could just go up. And all of a sudden, you're getting a guy outside of, or at least low end tight end 1, high end tight end 2 range that could finish mid range tight end 1. That could truly be
absolutely
a really strong fantasy asset. So I haven't really been on Kincaid, a lot throughout his career so far, but this is the year that I'm kind of leaning into it.
Man, I think you sold me on him. Because he's another guy I've been like, should I move him up?
It just takes a little bit of movement from a route share perspective for him to legitimately dominate.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah.
And we know we're getting better health.
Right.
So where do you have him?
Right now, I think I have him around. Yeah, I have him at tight end 10.
Gosh, I got to move him up.
Every player in the league has a scouting report, strengths, weaknesses, history, tendencies, everything an opponent wants to know. But what if somebody built a scouting report on you? Data brokers collect your personal stats, your name, address, phone number, family details, and other private information. Then they package it up and legally sell it to anyone willing to pay, sometimes just for pennies. And then what? The person buying your information may not be looking to draft you. They may be looking to scam you, steal your identity, and start using your name like it belongs to them. That's where LifeLock comes in. LifeLock's automatic data broker removal tool helps you find exposed personal information and remove it from those data brokers. If you fall victim to identity theft, LifeLock's restoration specialist will block and tackle for you, which means they'll handle your case from start to finish and restore your identity guaranteed. Because only LifeLock truly protects your name and your identity. So go get LifeLock at LifeLock.com and use promo code FOOTBALL for up to 30% off your first year. That's LifeLock.com, code FOOTBALL. Again, LifeLock.com, code FOOTBALL.
This episode sponsored by Homebase. Homebase is built for small businesses trying to do it all. The neighborhood coffee shop, the local gym, the family-run restaurant. With Homebase, you can schedule your team, track time, run payroll, and manage hiring from one easy app. So you can spend less time chasing timesheets and more time running the business your customers love. More than 150,000 small businesses already use Homebase to keep their teams on track. Start free at joinhomebase.com. Homebase, built for small businesses that do it all.
All right, my last guy. I love this guy. And I think you do too. No, you definitely do too. Jordan Tyson.
Oh, yeah. Any late round listener knows that this is
you've been big on him throughout the entire process, right?
Oh, he's been my wide receiver 1 since January. Yeah.
Sick.
Yeah.
So Jordan Tyson is going to open his career in like the greatest environment ever created for maximum box score production. I mean, I guess with the exception of Chris Olave being there, but the Saints play indoors.
Yeah.
They are set up for shootouts. They're going to have to compensate for a bad defense that lost Brian Brise, a starting defensive tackle, recently for the season. They're coached by Kellen Moore, who I think is a proven talent maximizer who emphasizes tempo and play volume. Kellen Moore wants to lead the NFL in offensive snaps every single year.
Yep.
Again, Brandon Thorne. Saints have the 7th best offensive line in the league, so that's really good for just environmental concerns.
Yep.
In the fantasy playoffs, weeks 15 through 17, the Saints play the Bucks, the Cardinals, and the Falcons. Love that.
Yep.
And then Nick Underhill, I was talking to him the other day, and he's watching training camp practice. He's like, he literally said that he thinks that Jordan Tyson might already be the best player on the Saints roster.
Yeah. Which, by the way, for Underhill is locked into the Saints more than any other person on the beat. He's amazing at what he does with the Saints. He knows.
He knows everything. I mean, he told us like weeks in advance that the Saints were going to take Jordan Tyson at number 8 overall.
Yeah,
and nailed it. So I have Jordan Tyson. It's getting ridiculous. I have him at 51 overall, which is like 35 spots ahead of his ADP. That might be irresponsible, but I want Jordan Tyson on literally every single fantasy roster that I draft in 2026.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. People know throughout the process, he was my wide receiver 1. His analytical profile was bonkers, 99th percentile breakout scorer, which is the most predictive metric that I have at wide receiver. Even if you look at like ADP trends historically, this is kind of interesting. Since 2014, we've had 9 rookie wide receivers drafted at wide receiver 19 to 42, so like a middle round range at wide receiver, who entered the league with a ZAP score above 90, which is where Jordan Tyson currently sits. The other names in that group are Malik Neighbors, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Drake London, Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, Mike Evans, and Sammy Watkins. The average player there averaged 14.2 PPR points per game as rookies, and only 2 of them failed to outperform ADP expectation. And one of those misses was Amari Cooper, who had a good rookie season. He just was drafted really, really high that year, so his ADP expectation was higher. And then, you mentioned the Chris Olave thing. This is what's kind of driven me a little bit nuts about this situation. I think the two complement each other incredibly well. Like, Jordan Tyson he can be a zone beater underneath kind of player, which is why I think that he might be a more favorable. I mean, I like him much more as a value for sure versus Olave right now. But Olave has always been really good at against man and stretching the defense and going vertical, right? Like that's always been his game because he can create such good separation in doing that. And so when you look at how the game of fantasy football is played, I think there's some chance that at least during like the second half of the season, we see Jordan Tyson just matching Chris Olave from a production standpoint and getting as much volume as Olave from a production standpoint because he might see some of those easier looks in the offense. It's similar to the argument of like Luther Burden versus Rome Odunze, where the Odunze stuff is more difficult for me to really jump onto because yes, like you might love him as a wide receiver. He might be incredible, by your eyes and your, whatever analysis you're doing. But in the end, you still have to look at how this player is being placed within this offense and used in this offense. And Burden is playing more of that layup role for fantasy purposes. The higher catchable target role, the scheme him open kind of role because he's so good after the catch. And I think that, I'm not saying that Jordan Tyson's a Luther Burden player because they're not really alike at all from that perspective, but Tyson can get a lot of that shorter stuff where I think he could be peppered with looks in this offense. I mean, we're already seeing some of these clips from practice, which are just, it's just bonkers, his route running ability. But I'm with you, man. I think Jordan Tyson, again, he's been one of those guys. I've had him ranked over Carnell Tate all summer in redraft and in Dynasty, but I feel just so much better about this environment than I do Tate's in the end, where I think that like we might look back and say like Tate's a better real life player or whatever the case may be. I don't think that's going to be the case, but I could see that happening. But I just think that what matters in fantasy football, Jordan Tyson can do very well. And that's what we're worried about here.
Another boomer take, but these guys, Jordan Tyson and Chris Olave, they kind of remind me from a skill set standpoint, and they of course they play indoors of like Torrey Holt and Isaac Bruce.
There we go. Yeah.
I mean, they're not like super, like from a skill set standpoint too. Yeah. Like they're not super physical receivers. They're not going to run you over, but they're like super bendy and flexible and fast, and they catch everything. And they're just like really, really good at playing wide receiver.
Yep.
And that's what Jordan Tyson and Chris Olave are. So
yeah,
I'm hoping that Tyler Shuck can be the Kurt Warner or even the Trent Green.
Yes. Wow, I did not expect to hear Trent Green on a podcast today. I actually talked about Shuck on the show. I just went with Malik Willis because I think it's an easier.
Well, the way that we are wrong about the Saints is if Tyler Shuck just isn't any good.
Yes, 100%, and I think that's a real possibility.
It is,
But I just, like you said, I trust what they have in front of him right now, and including the coaching staff, so it's a little bit easier to buy into just from that perspective. The last one I want to get to is Jalen Waddle. The dude's always been really good on a per route run basis. He had a 2.19 yards per route run last year, 24% targets per route run, 11.5% first downs per route run, which was really strong. He's entering year 6. That's usually a peak performance year, especially with earlier round wide receivers, for them to give you the most fantasy production. Now he's in Denver. They've been 12th in the NFL in touchdowns per game over the last 2 years with Bo Nix, 5th in pass attempts per game. So it's a more pass-friendly offense than what Jalen Waddle was leaving or where he was in Miami. Over the same time frame, Miami was 24th in touchdowns per game and 21st in pass attempts per game. So this is definitely a change in a favorable direction for Waddle. That Waddle's only played 2 seasons of his career in an offense with a positive EPA per play rate, and that was in 2022 and 2023, I believe. In those 2 seasons, 2.59 and 2.63 yards per route run rates. He scored 14.2 and 15.3 fantasy points per game, PPR points per game. But that was also with Tyreek Hill, where Hill was peak Tyreek Hill. He's getting a 28 to 30% target share. And so obviously Jalen Waddle's not seeing all of that work or as much as he could. I'm not really worried about the competition in Denver. I think Jalen Waddle is like by far the best talent on that team right now. I know Cortland Sutton always has believers in fantasy and he's a fine player, right? But also he's
very good role player.
Yeah, right. But he's also on the wrong side of the age curve at this point. I think that if anything, the guy that I've been targeting most is Pat Bryant.
Yes,
out of this offense.
Big slot.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's what we've seen work in the Peyton offense historically, and I also think that he can play a little X. Like he's capable of moving to the outside. So, like, I'm worried about Cortland Sutton. I've been worried about, like, I faded Cortland Sutton last year too. I'm going to be fading him again this year. Mostly this year though, it's a really easy case because I think Jalen Waddle is going to play that Z role in the offense, which is, if you guys remember, there was like a 5-week stretch last year where Troy Franklin was outpacing and out-targeting Cortland Sutton. Yep. And he was playing this role in that offense. And eventually the Broncos are like, you're not good enough to be doing this. We're going to start like in that playoff game, especially, like Pat Bryant was about to eat before he got injured. You remember that in to start that game? Yes. And so like they started moving things
concussion,
around. Right. And they started moving things around. Like I think that Jalen Waddle, because like during that stretch, Troy Franklin was getting like 8+ targets per game. And that's when everyone was like, oh, is he overtaking Cortland Sutton? Is he the better? And it's not so much that, it's the scheme that was allowing Troy Franklin to get as much love as he was getting because he was moving around the formation, getting those favorable matchups. They're going to do that with Jalen Waddle, and Jalen Waddle is a lot better than Troy Franklin, like light years better than Troy Franklin. So I am so excited about what Waddle can do. I think in a lot of home leagues, you end up seeing him go like late 4th into the 5th. I think that you could easily argue him all the way up into that top of the like 3rd round tier of wide receivers. I think that he is very close to, and I'm very high on like Devontae Smith. I really like Zay Flowers. I would still take them over Waddle, but I think Waddle's like next with Emeka Buka and stuff. Like I think that the upside case is definitely there with Waddle this year. Whereas if you look at a lot of these season long platforms, he's like wide receiver 20 or later, because I think he's burned a lot of fantasy managers, right? Because he's one of, he's got the Deontay Johnson syndrome where he gets hurt and then he leaves games. And then it's just a very frustrating player to have. But when he's healthy, man, he's just one of the best wide receivers in the game.
The Broncos agree with you. They gave up a 1st and a 3rd to go get him.
Yeah.
Poor Marvin Mims. I mean, we mentioned like every Broncos receiver. He didn't even get him. I guess he's just a return guy at this point. I've just graduated to just viewing him as a gadget kind of player at this point. Right. Yeah, I mean, one thing that stuck out in Matt Harmon's reception perception to me regarding Jalen Waddle, because he's a player that, as you mentioned, he's sort of like he's sort of divisive or polarizing. Like some people just think he sucks, but I mean, he's really, really good at winning downfield in that role that you mentioned that Troy Franklin was sort of shoehorned into last year. But Jalen Waddle can still win downfield at an elite rate. And the Broncos have the best offensive line in the league. Yeah. So they're going to give Bo Nix protection. And Bo Nix is sort of like known as a like a layup passer. Throws a lot of screens, a lot of high percentage stuff around the line of scrimmage. But he was 5th in the NFL in air yards last year. Bo Nix was.
Yeah.
Now, he had more attempts than he probably will have this year. But they do want to stretch the field.
Yeah.
And that's why they went and got Jalen Waddle.
Exactly.
So I'm on board.
Yeah. Love it, man. I appreciate the time. I love talking ball with you always. Let everyone know where they can find you and what you'll be up to this year.
Yeah, just establishtheRun.com. Michael Leone and I will be going head-to-head for this year's Man vs. Machine. We're taping on Wednesday. JJ and I are recording this on Monday, but we're taping on Wednesday, and hopefully we'll be out by maybe Thursday, certainly by Friday. I'm really excited. We have a lot of fun doing that show. Leone comes at it from like a super spreadsheet-oriented standpoint, and I try to be, the ball knower.
Yeah.
And he and I beat him in 2024 by like a hair, and he beat me, although I actually won this past year by a literal hair, because Levitan said, because I was really high on Jamison Williams, who was a freaking league winner, by the way.
Sure.
And then Levitan gave Leone the win on Jamison Williams, which was a bunch of crap. But that wound up tilting it, and Leone got the win with an asterisk this past year. So this is like the rubber match year.
Love it. I love it. Yeah, you guys are, you guys are friends of the business, friends of late round fantasy. We love you guys. I'm excited to see that whenever it releases. As always, make sure you guys are checking out lateround.com. Check out the late round draft guide. That will be updated on Friday as usual. I will be back with becoming a best ball bro, and then we have the late round show, and then we have a mailbag episode this week. So you guys will hear from me soon. Otherwise, everyone, as usual, thanks for tuning in.
Scams don't always look like scams anymore. AI can make a fake ticket offer look legit or a sportsbook text sound official. And once an identity thief gets your personal information, they can start using your name like it belongs to them. And then what? LifeLock helps detect potential identity threats and suspicious activity. And if identity theft happens, LifeLock's restoration specialists can help restore your identity, guaranteed, because only LifeLock truly protects your name and identity. Get LifeLock at LifeLock.com and use promo code FOOTBALL for up to 30% off your first year. That's LifeLock.com, code FOOTBALL.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.